Hi everyone. Thanks to Karen for the great introduction and the Confluencenter for having us, as well as Playground for hosting the event. This is such a great turnout. We're so glad to see so many of you here with us tonight. So if you haven't seen yet, we're back here. We're not sitting up there. We have some notes and dates and quotes, so we just want to review our notes to make sure that our facts right, so that there's any back here. But we'll be projecting on the screen. So before we get into our content, Cindy and I thought we'd give you a little background as to our interests. Show you to discuss our interests in this topic before getting into the content. So some of my research for the past couple of years is centered on perceptions of librarians, and I co-edited a book with Miriam Reiki from the University of Oregon. It was the Librarian Stereotype, deconstructing perceptions and presentations of information work, and that came out in June 2014. So we were looking at perception, status, pay, and identity of librarians, and we had a number of chapters in the book. Miriam and I wrote about contextualizing stereotype and the identity of librarians. We had chapters on shared stories and the folklore of librarianship, women's work, and the librarian stereotype, as well as increasing diversity and inclusion in the profession. But we also had some fun chapters as well. One was looking at the relationship between librarians and their tattoos. And another one, as you can see all the way to the left, was examining the cat lady librarian stereotype. That's the only comic book, the only chapter in the book, all in comic form. It was illustrated by Dorothy Gambrell of the Cat Girl comic. She also designed our cover to the right, and that is based on Bureau of Labor Statistics data. Kind of interesting. And that has been the majority of my work in this area. Now let's see.
Hi everybody, I'm Cindy Elliott, and does anybody recognize either of those images up on the screen? You people? Okay. Yes, Mad Men. That is the set of Mad Men. And on the right is Dr. Faye Miller. She was a strategist for a consumer research company on that show. So I started out in advertising and marketing, and my interest in consumer behavior and understanding the motivations of customer and understanding why they do things the way they do actually segued really well into my career in librarianship and my interest in the stereotype of the librarian. I've heard a fair number of queries of when I became a librarian, are you going to shush all day and stamp books and etc. So anyway, this is how I was interested in why stereotypes persist over time. Okay, so what are we going to do? So we're going to talk about who is a librarian. We're going to talk about what the stereotypes are, how you can recognize these popular stereotypes, where these stereotypes come from, and why are they considered harmful. And then we're going to introduce to you some real live librarians out there. And then we're going to play some games and answer any questions you have. So let's get started. Okay.
All right, so the first thing we wanted to do was start with a thought exercise. So if you want to close your eyes for just a minute, or don't, if you're eating or drinking something, you might not want to do that. But just imagine what you think a librarian looks like for a moment. What are they doing? What are they saying? What are they wearing? Just give you a second to think about that. So we wanted to do this to examine what our initial biases are. Likely you've been influenced by popular media as to what you would imagine a librarian looks like. And it has a big influence on our perceptions. So this is a good segue into a game we put together that we're calling, Is This a Librarian or Not? So we're going to have a series of images on the screen. Some are of actual live librarians, and some are people who are not librarians. And so we're just going to have you shout out whether you guess that this person is a librarian or not. All right, so we're going to start off with the first one here. Anything? No. Yes. No? Seems really mixed. All right, yes, it is a librarian.
All right.
She's a teen programming specialist from a public library in Philadelphia. That was taken at one of the library conferences. All right, next one. What do you think?
No.
No?
Mary Lee.
Seems like maybe too obvious with the pearls. No, but it is a paleoanthropologist from the This Is What a Scientist Looks Like blog. I tried to trick you. All right, ready for the next one? That's very mixed again. This one is a no. She's a fashion blogger. So it's not a librarian. But so it's nice to hear yes for that, you think. All right, 2 more to go. Yes. Very strong yes. This is an international photo. It's the chief specialist from the Department of Library Funds Management in Elliott State University in the Republic of Georgia. So he's having a snack outside, and yes, he's a librarian. All right, last one. Okay, mix it again. Hearing more yeses. Yes, she is. This again was taken at a library conference. This is the librarian at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Fancy. All right. That's not in the game, but what do you think? All right, so after playing that game, were you surprised by who was the librarian or by how many of them you got right? Is anybody really surprised? All right, I guess that was half a rhetorical question, so that's fine. So the media typically portrays librarians doing repetitive tasks. The 3 S's, so shushing, stamping, and shelving, and that's usually how we're portrayed. And so it can be difficult to guess sometimes in those pictures without those contextual clues. And usually most of the public doesn't know what librarians actually do, so those images of the stamping, shushing, and shelving serve as a mental shortcut to understand what librarians do. This popular imagery then has a really big influence on how we perceive librarians and what our biases are. And the stereotypes are used for understanding, so it's sort of a mental shortcut. That's kind of how stereotypes work, and it exacerbates the problem even more. A few librarians have done research on the different types of stereotypes or categories of stereotypes. Maura Seal from Georgetown has done some of that research, and she's come up with 5 categories. I have 3 of hers here, and then I added in 1 more of mine just to show some of the more recognizable categories that are out there, particularly in popular media. So she has, we go from left to right, she has the police, or the authoritarian librarian, there's the hero, there's the old maid, which is probably the most recognizable stereotype out there. You can see her with her glasses and her bun shushing by her book cart. And then I added 1 more, which was the sexy or glamorous librarian, which also is very popular, but was not included in her article, so 1 on there. So as we look at these popular representations, we're going to get into some media clips and ads that Cindy's going to show you. You'll probably recognize these categories, and we'll also point them out. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Cindy.
Thanks, Nicole. So as Nicole mentioned, we're going to see a variety of stereotypes depicted in popular media. Now, you're not going to see every single media depiction of librarians. We picked a sample. Most of these are popular things that you've seen before. So we want to talk about, do these clips reinforce or go against your stereotypes, and are the positive stereotypes you see out there really positive? Does anybody know who this librarian is? All right, good. Yep, she's probably the most famous. This is Marian Peru. She's the heroine of 1962 Broadway musical and movie The Music Man, and she has her own song, Marian the Librarian. I'm sorry for those of you who want to hear that song, I'm not going to play it. But the character of Marian will invoke some popular stereotypes of librarians, that they're old maids and they're too wrapped up in the textual world to experience real life. So you're wondering to yourself, well, why does this matter? Well, the reason stereotypes matter, according to media theorist Stuart Hall, is that it seems insignificant or unimportant. But mass media produces representations of the social world, descriptions, explanations for understanding how the world is and how it works. And so when you see the cop or the hero or the sexy librarian, the old maid, it's important to acknowledge that these are representations of librarians through the mass media lens, but not necessarily real life. Okay, so the next librarian. Anybody know who this is? This is probably on your television every year. Yes, Wonderful Life. So this is Mary. This is from 1946. And romances or romantic subplots are popular for depictions of librarians because library work was considered a very nice, safe job while waiting for Mr. Right to drop in and return your books and she's waiting to get married. So you'll see on the left, she's very happy, she's got pearls on, she's got her hair done, she's got George in the back. And meanwhile, on the right, there's sad Mary, an alternate reality Mary, with her glasses and her frown, and otherwise her coat, and she's not looking very happy. So this portrayal of librarians is to convey just how bad things can go without George around. So Mary is an old maid, and in 1946, old maid was synonymous with librarian. So this character reflects some societal beliefs about librarians at that time, that librarians were single, unhappy women. So now, let's watch a clip.
Yes, George? Where's Mary? Oh, well, I can't.
I don't know how you know these things, but tell me, where is she? If you know where she is, tell me where my wife is.
I'm not supposed to tell.
Please, Clarence, tell me where she is.
You're not going to like it, George.
Where is she?
She's an old maid. She never married.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she?
She's just about to close up the library. There must be some easier way for me to get my way.
Wow. She's just about to close up the library.
Terrible.
All right, so this is alternate reality Mary. Creepy George is going to follow her now. Of course she thinks. It's tragic. Okay, fast forward. Does anybody recognize this film? Foul Play, I heard it, yes, Foul Play. This is, fast forward to the 1970s, and not much has changed in the old maid stereotype for librarians, even though much had changed at the time for women. So this character, Goldie Hawn, she plays a San Francisco librarian, and she meets a bumbling cop named Chevy Chase, and they fall in love and they solve crimes. So on the right, I'm going to show you a clip of Goldie talking to her friend, and you'll sort of be surprised at what she says.
Hey, Bear, I need you. So, what's going on tonight? Oh, nothing special. I'm going to go to a movie. By yourself? Yes. Gloria, this has got to stop. Just because you've had one bad experience doesn't mean that you give up. I haven't given up. I came to this party tonight. Ever since the divorce, you lock yourself in that library and hide behind those glasses. Look at you. You used to be a cheerleader. You used to show some cleavage. Just let's see some skin, shake your booty, take some chances. What are you playing, old maid? I'm not playing anything. That's the...
Yeah, so she's an old maid, not showing her cleavage anymore. Oops.
Hey, Bear, I need you. So,
Okay, sorry about that. So in the next genre I'm going to talk about is adventure and thriller. And so libraries are very prevalent in this film genre. Information is an essential plot point, usually to move the plot along. But usually what you see is the hero or the heroine depicted, not the librarian. So heroes are usually crouched around a table leafing through books in this scene. And this is an example from Harry Potter. There's lots. There's some from Doctor Who. Some of them are even in the same library, the same scene, just different films. And so what's interesting about this is, does anybody recognize, well, the character on the left? Her name? Yeah, librarian from Harry Potter. So basically she was a highly suspicious librarian, and she would place nasty spells in the books so that when they're returned, if they weren't returned on time, the students would get in trouble. So what kind of stereotype is she? Spinster, maybe comp. So what's interesting is J.K. Rowling said that she'd like to apologize to librarians for this particular character, because if they had a helpful, pleasant librarian, half of her plots would not exist. Because invariably the answer is in some sort of book where Hermione has to go find it. And so then she wouldn't have anything to talk about in her book. So that's true quote. Okay, so we do a little bit better in sci-fi fantasy. And anybody recognize those librarians?
One guy.
Yeah. So on the left you've got Evie O'Connell from The Mummy. And she's basically a female Indiana Jones. So she kicks some butt, and she travels all over the world to find the lost book of Amun-Ra. And you've got on the right the character from The Librarian, who's now been recreated again in a nice series on TNT. So usually in the sci-fi world, information equals knowledge, which usually gives power. So the themes of custodian or preserver of knowledge is important in sci-fi and fantasy. And if the future determines you might be devastated by Armageddon, then information is usually a key factor. So depending on who's in power at the time, librarians may be trained in the facilitation of knowledge to keep information out of the hands of evil or falling into the hellmouth, right? So the stereotypes, however, though, are interesting with this, because who would you think Evie O'Connell is? She's young, she's single, right? Well, she's actually considered a hero, so you know she's a librarian and not afraid to say it. And then on the right, you've got this character played by Noah Wiles, and he's sort of the ineffectual stereotype. So that's usually used to describe male librarians. And even though he seems macho up there, he's also bookish, brilliant, and socially inept. So sorry.
Where did that come from?
All right. Anybody seen this before? Okay. I had a very long conversation with my sister about this character, Twilight Sparkle. Okay? So she is a librarian, and I'm just going to play the clip for you, and then I'm going to talk about her.
What'd you do that for, Fluttershy? Because you just look so peaceful. I
Notice she's sucking water in the library.
Let's be finish. Oh, for the love of Twilight, what's going on? Why does everybody look so great? Don't ask. I need you to help me find something.
There's Twilight Sparkle.
Hey Twilight, what's soaking wet and clueless?
Fluttershy, I've had just about your face. What's happened, Wimpy Pony? I guess you just bring out the worst in us, Spike. No time to explain. We've got to find the reference guide to the elements of harmony before some pony does something she'll regret. The elements of harmony? Oh, I know exactly where that book is. Found it! Fluttershy, you better give me that book. Keep on! Hey, Applejack, give me that book. I don't have any book. Hickey, you guys! Stop it right now! Hey! Do you even know what you just stole? No, but if you want it, I want it! Give me that one! Where's Rarity? It's me! This is my book, and I'm gonna read it!
Librarian's gonna read it all.
The elements!
Okay, so she's kind of an ineffectual librarian because she doesn't really do, management materials very well. She does reference pretty terribly, actually. And if you watch the series, and she's very kind, and she's brave, and she's intelligent. So I feel mixed feelings about this particular librarian. So maybe you guys can watch the series and we can talk about that. All right, everybody recognize this guy on the left? Okay, so this is one of my favorite shows of all time, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But Giles, as Black describes him, is he's a withdrawn soul who prefers vicarious experience in the form of reading while promoting reading to real experience in the real world, in quotes and quotes. These representations often invoke librarians' discomfort with the social world. So he doesn't like computers.
Well, look who's here. Welcome to my world. You scared?
I'm remaining calm, thank you. I just wanted to return this. I found it among the new books and naturally I thought of you.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I'll see you along.
Can't get out of here fast enough, can you?
Truthfully, I'm less anxious to be around computers than I used to be.
Well, it was your book that started all trouble, not a computer. Honestly, what is it about them that bothers you so much?
The smell.
Computers don't smell, Lumber.
I know. Smell is the most powerful trigger to the memory there is. A certain flower or a whiff of smoke can bring up experiences long forgotten. Books smell musty and rich. The knowledge gained from a computer is it has no texture, no context. It's there and then it's gone. If it's to last, then the getting of knowledge should be tangible. It should be smelly.
Right. Well, you really are an old-fashioned boy, aren't you?
Well, I don't dangle a corkscrew from my ear.
That's not where I dangle it.
All right, I recently saw this movie. Does anybody know what this character is? Has anybody seen this one?
I have.
Okay, yes, a few of you have, yes. This is from Monsters University, and this is a very recent film. If you've seen Monsters, Inc., this is when they were in college. And so there's a game called the Scare Games, where characters had to go into the library and sneak a flag out. And I really wish I had a clip to show you of this, but if you see this movie, I know, I'm sorry, but if you see this movie, you will see this giant tentacle octopus woman pick up college kids and throw them out the window because they're making too much noise in the library. So this is probably the most overused stereotype, so the shushing, yelling, angry librarian, and Radford described this police librarian depiction as a fearsome figure, capable of handing out punishment in the form of public humiliation. So the quote from the film is, in a real scare, you don't want to get caught by a kid's parent. And in this event, you don't want to get caught by the librarian. Dun, dun, dun. All right. This is pretty popular, right? We'll just go ahead and play this one.
It's you.
The torso apparition, and it's real.
So what do we do?
Could you come over here and talk to me for a second, please? Just come over here for a second, please.
Come
here, Francie. Come here.
What are you doing?
Couldn't make contact. One of us should actually try to speak to him.
Great. Now, Peter, where are you from? Originally. Okay. The usual stuff isn't working. Okay. I know plenty. I know exactly. Okay. Now stay close. Stay close. Hang on. Do exactly as I say. Ready? Ready? Get
All right, so here's another depiction. Does anybody know what this character stereotype would be? I'm gonna run a picture of this.
Party girl.
Yes, party girl. This is from 1995, and you can see her on the left with her aunt. She has to go become a library clerk to pay off a debt. Now, I personally can't decide what she's depicting in this. Is this a parody of an actual cop stereotype, or is this the cop stereotype? You choose.
Excuse me. What are you doing? Yeah, you. Were you just putting that book away? It looked like you were just putting that book away. I guess you didn't know we had a system for putting books away. No, I'm curious. You were just randomly putting that book on the shelf. Is that it? You've just given us a great idea. I mean, why are we wasting our time with the Dewey Decimal System when your system is so much easier, much easier? We'll just put the books anywhere. Hear that, everybody? Our friend here has given us a great idea. We'll just put the books any damn place we choose. We don't care, right? Isn't that right?
Let me take a break.
I just want to do a good job, Howard.
You are doing a good job. Take a break.
So yeah, with the cop stereotype goes along with an excessive need for control and order, and propensity for exacting disproportional retribution when faced with unruly users and overdue books. So know-it-alls and librarians exert power and authority over their users as well. Anybody recognize librarian on the left? Yes, Parks and Rec. She may be one of the more complicated characters. That's Tammy too, obsessed with Ron Swanson over at Parks and Rec. She's the deputy director of the library. But then there's Leslie Note.
You seem to have a $40 late fee on a book called Mysteries of the Female Orgasm.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do. And go! Come back, book jockey!
Book jockey. All right, so I guess you can pretty much tell what this depiction is, right? Now, I would be remiss, because I have a background in advertising, not to include some ads. So the one on the right is an ad for Bacardi from 1998. And this was to sell rum to young people because it was known as a vacation drink for cruises. And so they were trying to get young people with day jobs that they thought were boring to buy and look interesting while drinking alcohol. So you've got your, that went into, I think, $15 million of media sales. And then on the left, you've got Pearl Vision that also has some lawyers and bankers in their ads, so we're not the only ones. But you can see how the mental shortcut shows up here. You put on some glasses and suddenly you're the sexy librarian. And the campaign goes, now you can afford to experiment. These glasses make me look like a blank. So. Okay, so fast forward, here's another representation. Anybody recognize her? Okay, so that's Barbara Gordon. She's a librarian at Gotham City Public Library by day, crime fighter at night. This is a show that aired in 1966, and this character was put on the air in the attempt to bring in female readers and viewers. And while librarianship was a socially acceptable job for young women at the time, for young married women in the early 60s, she became and this is a popular stereotype, but she definitely became an empowerment for a lot of young women. So on the right, I'm going to show you a PSA that was created in 1972, where she, for the United States Department of Labor, where she advocated for equal pay.
A deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town. And a ticking bomb spells trouble for Batman and Robin.
Holy, breaking and entering, it's Batgirl.
Quick, Batgirl, untie us before it's too late.
It's already too late. I've worked for you a long time and I'm paid less than Robin.
Oh,
Same job, same employer means equal pay for men and women.
no time for jokes, Batgirl.
It's no joke. It's a federal equal pay law.
Holy act of Congress. Can we talk about this later? Will Batgirl save the dynamic duo? Will she get equal pay? Tune in tomorrow or contact the Wage and Hour Division listed in your phone book under the U.S.
All right, anybody recognize these characters? I think this is parody, you decide.
Why does being a librarian make her even hotter? The keepers of knowledge. She also answers to all of our questions. Will you marry me? And why there's still libraries? I want to be a book. Just pick me up, flip through my pages, make sure nobody drew wieners in me. And maybe for 2 lunch shishas. Books! 10 years ago.
So let's take advantage of the shortcut for comedy, right? Okay, so we're running close out of time, so I'm going to skip through this. This is UHF on the right, and that is definitely a parody. You guys have probably heard that quote, you're using the Dewey Decimal System. And these are also popular depictions. Oh, let's go back and play it.
Never before in the history of motion pictures has there been a screen presence so commanding, so powerful, so deadly. He's Conan the Librarian.
Can you tell me where I can find a book on astronomy?
Don't you know the Dewey Decimal System? Conan the Librarian.
I'm sorry. These books are a little overdue.
Conan the Librarian. Tonight, only on U62.
There's a Lego character who's now a librarian, and I suggest you go to their website and read the description. It's quite funny. And then, of course, you have children's books, and in children's books, we're usually portrayed as caregivers or helpers. They're also known as heroes. So in this particular genre, we fare fairly well. All right, and this is my last clip, and I'll just quickly play it, but this is for the librarians in the room. This is Desk Set. And this librarian in 1957 was competing with a computer. And I think we'll play that.
Here they are. I'd say the Times Index for this. The old Farmer's Almanac for this, if not U.S. Weather Information Service. But check the Farmer's Almanac first and save time. This is from the Bible. Book of Amos, chapter 1.
Thank you.
All right, so what do these stereotypes tell us? Well, they tell us that no one really knows what we do, so they make it up and build fictional ideas of what librarians do and what they are. And it informs you and helps you fill in the gaps. Thanks, Brian. Awesome. Okay, so way back, the beginning of time. No, not the beginning of time. Beginning of writing, there were collections of manuscripts. cuneiforms started. You collected cuneiforms and you, in Sumerian, back in Sumerian, sorry, I'm not reading my notes now so you can tell the difference. And then fast forward to Benedictine monasteries where they wrote down and copied information and in scriptoriums. And this was very important to that type of life that monks led, to collect information and to have this type of information. And later on, when the printing press came about, then young men went to college and got educations. But what you'll notice about all of that time is very male-dominated field. Now I'm turning back over to Nicole.
All right, so if we fast forward a few centuries to the Victorian era, 1852 was the year that the first woman librarian was hired in the U.S., and that was at the Boston Public Library. And by 1910, over 78% of all U.S. librarians were women. And that statistic hasn't changed very much because currently it's just over 80% of all librarians in the U.S. are women. The perceptions changed a great deal during this time period. So between when the first woman was hired in 1852 and then when the the percentage of women in the profession exploded in 1910. So on the left, you have this gentleman here. This was the main image of the librarian. A preoccupied man, dressed all in black. He was obsessed with order, considered ineffectual and grim and bookish, not too appealing. And then the woman, the stereotype changed to focus on her in 1905. And she was a Victorian spinster and all the baggage that would come with that. So they're both pretty negative stereotypes, but the big shift was mostly from a bookish man to a woman. In 1909, that was the year that the word stereotype was documented for the first time in a popular library trade journal, documented by librarians lamenting how they were being portrayed in fiction. And of course, the stereotypes are wrapped up within larger societal issues. They always have been, and they still are, and not just for librarians, but for any stereotype. So the nature of library work as the profession became more feminized shifted to service work, serving, caring, warm. And that was because it was wrapped up in what was considered women's work. And unfortunately, that type of work is typically devalued, and especially back then, so both in status and pay. Dee Garrison, in her research, said that women would not feel humiliated by serving by playing in the library the part they played in the home. So this was sort of the rationalization for the shift in library work as more women entered the field, that it would be okay to have women serving, but not men. And of course, we can't talk about the history of librarianship or librarian stereotypes without looking at Melville Dewey. So, for those of you who are not librarians in the room, you probably are a little bit familiar with the Dewey Decimal System, but that is how libraries, usually public libraries and K-12 school libraries, organize their books. So if you checked a book out from your public library, you probably used the Dewey Decimal System. So Dewey was both a blessing and a curse. We could say he was more of a blessing. He did pave the way for women. So he created an opportunity for women to get a higher level of education. Columbia University was the first library school that accepted women into the program. He also, of course, then, through that, allowed women to enter a profession that required higher education, and that was very rare at the time. Unfortunately, he positioned women as cheap labor to help stabilize declining library budgets. So, hire these women, you don't have to pay them as much. On top of that, he was practically obsessed with efficiency and scientific management, and that was very detrimental to the professional image. So those two issues combined, as the Radfords say, Gary and Marie Radford, who done research on this, they're Rutgers, they said this created and perpetuated a submissive, dependent, spinsterish librarian image, and this had a lot of staying power. So, moving ahead to the 30s and the 40s, the stereotype was very problematic and was proliferating even more. During Dewey's time, he really did try to divorce the profession from these stereotypes with the idea of the mouser and the sack, but to no avail. The stereotypes are very entrenched. The profession tried turning stereotypes on its head, looking for the opposite of the old maid, which apparently was the sexy or the glamorous librarian stereotype. There were mixed feelings within the profession. You would see in a professional trade journal, a librarian asked, should librarians be glamour girls? However, you would see job ads during this time looking for, quote, glamour girls to fill library positions. So I don't know how that worked out for them. But I will say by 1943, a glamorous Reader's Advisor librarian was featured on the cover of Mademoiselle, and that was very exciting to younger librarians at the time. Unfortunately, it didn't do much to improve the image or, of course, the overarching societal challenges for women. So now, instead of just being the old maids, librarians could be either an old maid or a sexy librarian. So it didn't replace the stereotype, just added another. And this combination of the old maid and the sexy or the glamorous librarian turned into sort of a Donna-Hor dichotomy in a way, illustrating views and expectations of women in society at the time, but unfortunately that still persists currently. And back to the Radfords, they've done a lot of really good research on this, and we have a lot of their quotes, but they said there was a clear relationship between the representation and treatment of women and the low status of the library profession. Another contributing factor to the stereotype, which might be a little more surprising, is actually architecture. So there were 3,500 Carnegie libraries built between 1883 and 1929, and all of them had a similar feature of having a reference desk placed at the center of the library. So the desk and the librarian sitting at the desk were seen as sort of a panopticon, overseeing all patron activities. So this is contributing to the idea of librarians as authority figures or being mean, and also plays into power issues, and viewing librarians as gatekeepers of information. But of course, imagining the gates, unfortunately, as being kept closed instead of open. And we fast forward a little further to the 21st century. In the early aughts, you might have seen an onslaught of articles about hipster librarians. There was a major one in the New York Times in 2007 when I was starting library school, and I thought, oh no. But so you know, this has sort of died out now, but it did happen for the early aughts. And if we think about how the idea of the hipster works, if that word even means anything anymore, is we can think of it that it functions on irony. So with this stereotype, we could think librarians are possibly ironically hip, and maybe that's how that one works. I'm not really sure exactly how that one came about. I will say the Chicago Public Library did run an ad campaign for a while, showing pictures of hipper librarians, I guess, with tattoos and dyed hair, and it would say, yes, they're one of us. So it also came internally from within the profession. They're no longer running that ad campaign. So as you can see, we've been collecting stereotypes over time, but not ever getting rid of any of them. So a potential solution could be to show that there's really no uniform way to be a librarian, instead of always trying to find the opposite of whatever the worst stereotype at the time is. It's also really important to show what librarians actually do. So like, as we've talked about before, how the media portrays us, stamping, shushing, and shelving with these repetitive tasks. If people actually know what librarians do, it might be able to replace the stereotype, instead of the stereotype functioning as this mental shortcut to fill the blanks describing what we do. And, yeah.
All right, here are some e-cards out there. I had fun with this one because, yeah. I became a librarian because I like books, not people. If I become a librarian, who am I kidding? Nobody wants to be a librarian. Right, so why is this harmful? So these stereotypes persist, and you know, when you're looking at bringing in new professionals into the career librarianship, this is the stuff that they see. So their potential new hires that you might have might be seeing this and thinking, I don't know, I don't think this might not be the career for me. So what do librarians actually do? Okay, so now we're going to introduce some librarians to you that are in the audience, some real life ones outside of us. And first off, we're going to start with Dan Lee. He's the director of the Office of Copyright Management.
So I get to be both the police librarian and the helpful librarian. There's sort of two sides to my job. I'm a copyright resource on campus for anyone who has questions, problems, issues that doesn't require a lawyer, because I'm not. There is an intellectual property specialist in the general counsel's office if you need that. So one part of that role is I'm also the guy that hears about peer-to-peer file sharing on campus and have to be the policeman about that. So hopefully no students in here have ever heard of me. The other side is promoting more open for sharing scholarly output of our faculty generally. So I'm co-chairing a task force with a faculty senate-based task force on open access. The federal government, the federal research agencies are now requiring funded research to openly share their papers and data to help research compliance figure that out and help support that. But also then I help support the work of colleagues in the library, like Kimberly Chapman, who directs our campus repository service, Chris Colin, who manages and supports data management and sharing, helps people meet those requirements, and Cheryl Collier, who's working on open educational resources.
All right, Annabelle, where are you? Come up to the front. This is Annabelle Nunez.
So every time I get a microphone, I want to do karaoke. So that's a total myth. You know, librarians do all kinds of things. And the first time I went to a librarian conference, I freaked out because they are the craziest people I have ever seen. So I am a health sciences librarian over at the Health Sciences Center, and I'm what you would call an embedded librarian, where I actually live among the college in public health. So just to kind of backtrack, I've only been a librarian for just over a decade, so this is sort of a new profession for me. My previous life was actually working in the community at a nonprofit organization called the Tucson Arts Council. So what I did there was actually work with communities and engage community in capacity building, programming, these kinds of things, grant writing, and I was able to parlay those skill sets into the work that I do at College of Public Health. So it was very helpful for me to be able to use those skills. As an embedded librarian, what I do essentially is basically serve the constituents in the library. Basically, that would be the faculty, staff, and students. But in addition to that, with the experience that I have having done community work and social justice work as a neighborhood association president here, a native of Tucson, I've been able to connect the researchers and folks in the College of Public Health to the community. So I have been able to create some value as a librarian to the college, connecting them to community when they're doing community-based programs. So that's been a real nice skill set for myself. I've got a cheat sheet here, so that I make sure I don't go off on campus, because I can easily do that. And I can't read my writing, that's all. So yeah, community campus partnership is very important. I think it brings a lot of value to the college, and being able to connect, especially when researchers are trying to talk to communities, underserved communities, and that's my area of expertise, having been able to work with the Latino community, the Hispanic community, and also engage in programs in Spanish as well. So that's what I do as a health sciences librarian, and we have a good time, right, folks?
Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Rebecca, you're up. I feel like a DJ for Rebecca.
No, thank you. We don't know what order we're in, so this is like crazy. My name is Rebecca Blakiston. I'm a librarian within the User Experience Department, which is a new department at the U of A Library. I started out in reference and instruction, and I've been doing a lot with our website, so I work very closely with our web developers, designers, and programmers to really enhance the experience of students and faculty as they use the library, both on our web presence and and also in a physical space. So I do a lot of usability testing. We do user research where we go out into the community. We do focus groups. We do user interviews. We see what is the experience and how can we make it a better experience for our users, both in that digital and that physical space. What's really cool about the library is we serve everyone on campus. So it's very different from a department where you're not necessarily isolated or siloed, but you don't have that really broad audience and perspective that the library has. We're a neutral space. We're a space that anyone can come to and feel welcome and included, and we serve all of our users equally. So I really like my job. You do a lot of learning every day. You work with a lot of different people. I started as a shelver, shelving books in the library as a freshman. I took an aptitude test because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it told me I should be a librarian. And I did not know that you have to get a master's degree to be a librarian. You do. I ended up getting a staff job in the library and working my way through my graduate program and found out that it's a job that I love. You learn something every day. You're always doing something different, and it's very cool. It's very rewarding. So, only good things to say about that.
Dan, you're up.
All right, thank you. My name is Ian Hen. I'm on the techie side of librarian. So I have computer science program. Typically, I have 1 or 2 students from computer science working with me to do online publishing. So anything you want to put online, I probably can do it. Either video, audio, image. On the professional side, I do be part of my job too, to participate in the international standard organization, ISO standardization of certain standards related to information technology, information exchange. For example, DOI, if you publish articles, journals, you probably know what DOI is, and also as a PDF. So any question you have for DOI, PDF, and TIFF or JPEG 2000, I think I can handle it.
All right, now we have Rosita.
Kiss fans.
Okay, so yes, my name is Marita Baldock, and I'm actually an archivist in special collections. Shout out us. So being an archivist is sort of similar to being a librarian. That's how I usually explain it to my friends and family. But I usually say that the kinds of materials we work with are a little different, the more unique or unusual. Some types of materials include rare books, the papers of people, the papers of families, records of old businesses, those types of things. So some typical types of material you might find in an archive include things like old letters, diaries, scrapbooks, old photographs, little pieces that sort of tell you a little bit about the past. So I guess if I explain my job, I say I oversee many areas to manage the collections, including supervising archival processing, which basically means organizing collections. I manage graduate students. I make collection development decisions. And I help to reach out to potential donors of material. So in short, the job of an archivist really is to collect interesting historical materials for the future and work really hard to make them available to the public, which includes people on campus as well as people nationwide as well as internationally. So working with archives is a fun job because every day you really know, you never know what you're going to discover. I always say, you never really know what's going to be in that next box. So no 2 days of my job are the same, and that's what makes it so fun, so rewarding.
Now you've heard from some real life librarians, and you can think to yourself when you're seeing some of these mass media images and stereotypes out there in popular culture, you can think, okay, are these really representation of people that are out there? So the next slide I'd like to show you is why are stereotypes harmful? So you can see on the screen, I'm going to talk about 2 things. One is, can you guess which is the feminized profession and which is the male-dominated profession? Can anybody guess?
Librarian.
Librarians are female-dominated. It's 80%, and you need a master's, as Rebecca mentioned earlier. Accountants, you don't need a master's, you need a bachelor's degree, but you make more money. And database administrators, they need some certifications and bachelor's degree, but you also don't need a master's. So it's just an interesting dichotomy there of pay. So when you're trying to recruit people into your profession, these are the kinds of careers that they can choose, and they may not want to choose to become a librarian. The other thing that is interesting about being a librarian that stereotypes create, or that are harmful in stereotypes, is the emotional labor that librarians carry. Now that may be a term that you may not be familiar with, but it's a term that is used to describe many of the service workers' job. So what that is when you have to manage your own and others' expectations and their emotions. So for example, if you're taking care of an airline passenger, or if you're a nurse in a hospital, those might come to mind, but you may not think of librarians as carrying heavy loads of emotional labor. So that's just something to point out, that it's a key component of many library jobs, and research on emotional labor shows that it can be both positive and negative effects on individuals, such as job satisfaction and job burnout as a result of having to manage large amounts of emotional labor. So that's just one way that a perception of a librarian can demonstrate, that when users come in and have a predetermined idea of what a librarian is, can have a positive or negative effect on the librarians as well as their users.
So we have two other reasons stereotypes are harmful. Here's one, looking at diversity within librarianship. And of course, racial and ethnic diversity is only one aspect of diversity, but it's a little easier to measure and visualize. So we have Chris Borg, who is the director of the MIT Libraries, put these two charts together to compare the demographics of librarians in 2010 compared to the projected population for 2013. And this blue area is the white librarians, so we have 88% there, it's hard to see, on the left versus 62% on the right, so there's a mismatch there. She actually called this, she wrote this blog post with the charts, the unbearable whiteness of librarianship. And it's true. And currently, I think it was just measured in 2014, it decreased just a little bit to 85%, but it's not much difference. So the stereotypes do help to keep librarianship very white. They show what a librarian is supposed to look like and what a librarian is supposed to act like. So the old maid, the sexy stereotypes, and the hipster all follow a set of white middle-class norms, essentially, potentially closing off the profession to those not fitting into these demographics. And that, coupled with what Cindy talked about with pay, does not make a very appealing profession. So, it's not the only reason for the lack of diversity, of course, but it certainly doesn't help. And since we are on a university campus, we did want to touch on how these stereotypes can be harmful for students. So there is such a thing called library anxiety. It's kind of like math anxiety. So with the large size of the library building, the enormous amount of resources, and a potentially confusing organizational system, students can get anxiety about using the library and completing their research assignments. On top of that, the negative stereotypes of librarians as being mean or unhelpful might discourage students from asking for help. So this creates more anxiety. So students might avoid the library, procrastinate on their research assignments, and not ask for help from librarians. So if you look at the image on the left, I think you noticed some of the words there. That's from Project Information Literacy. And those are the 12 most common descriptors for research assignments. This study was a large-scale study looking at how students approach their research and in using the library. So you have fear, angst, tired, dread, excited, anxious, annoyed, stressed, disgusted, intrigued, confused, and overwhelmed. So out of that list of 12, only 2 are positive words, so that's not so good. And it really shows how important it is to help students work with librarians and diffuse their anxiety, or it can be a contributing factor to helping or harming their success. And this image on the right is the logo from the Ariel study, which is a large-scale ethnographic study of Illinois academic libraries, and they also looked at undergrads. So they were looking at student perceptions of using the library and librarians. And they found that students do not know what librarians do or that they can ask for help. So here, very much so, the stereotype is a mental shortcut for them, where assumptions about librarian helpfulness or intelligence can be impacted. Another thing found from this study is that faculty broker students' relationships with the library. So if the faculty tended to be more positive about the library and included librarians or the library in research assignments or other aspects of their courses, students were more positive about the library, better able to approach the research assignments. So both of these studies reinforce connecting students with libraries and librarians and how important that is, and that teaching faculty have a very big role in this relationship. So, what are all the answers now? Of course, Cindy and I don't have all the answers of where we go from here. We do have some suggestions, though, for you to consider. So, one thing would be to help increase awareness about what librarians actually do, as we've touched on a few times in this talk tonight, to help replace the mental shortcuts that the popular media stereotypes produce. Another thing would be to be aware of how librarians and others in feminized professions are portrayed. And again, feminized professions could also be teaching, nursing, social work, etc. To envision librarians as partners or collaborators rather than solely helpers, and this is again tied into women's work, emotional labor, and those ideas of caregiving and service work. You can vote for libraries. There's the first ever library political action committee called Every Library, and they promote library initiatives nationwide, mostly public, but they're expanding this next year. If you're here and you happen to be faculty, have students engage with the library more, you can meet with the liaison librarians, you collaborate on instruction or class activities, assignments using the library. We're here to help. And of course, come to talks like this one, so we really appreciate you being here tonight, and we hope you found this fun and useful.